That's okay, Joe.
All right, girl.
Well, good morning, everybody. Seems like some people are awake. Good. So we're all here because we recognize the huge opportunity in mobile. That's a given. But there is one thing that separates the truly transformational companies from all the rest. And that is that they recognize and take advantage of tectonic shifts. And boy, are the tectonic plates in mobile moving quickly. Just in the last couple months, we've had King.com, Supercell, Uber, and of course WhatsApp go through either financings or significant M&A transactions. And we know from the data that the App Store is growing like gangbusters. App downloads over the last 24 months growing nearly 2x. But even more stunning is that revenue over that same period has been growing over 4 times. You developers out there in the mobile ecosystem are creating real businesses on top of mobile. But underneath the surface of this app vertical layer is a whole mobile ecosystem, which we term mobile tectonics. It's vast, it's complex, it's kind of like this graphic up here. There are multiple layers, and it's important to understand how all this fits together. We at Sequoia use mobile tectonics to figure out where the next billion-dollar opportunity might lie. And it also forms the context on which we have a lot of strategic conversations with our mobile companies as to how to win and how to create unfair advantage in an ever-changing mobile environment. So what is the mobile tectonic ecosystem like? Here's a flash. 3 layers. A foundational layer at the bottom, a horizontal layer in the middle, and a vertical app layer at the top. There's a lot to take in here, so let's use a quick practical example. If you wouldn't mind, pull out your handsets and imagine if you were to send a message using your favorite messaging app to a colleague or a friend. Probably a smartphone experience which you have multiple times a day. How many companies are involved in that transaction? Very simple smartphone transaction. Of course, you have the hardware device that you use and all the components involved there. You also had the OS, Google perhaps, or iOS. Then you had the network carriers, AT&T or Verizon. You had the messaging app that you chose, that vertical app, whichever one it might be. But did you think about all of the SDKs that were included in that vertical app? The bug tracking company, the analytics company, perhaps the payments company, or maybe there was a location API that was polled while you sent that message. This is what we mean when we talk about the mobile ecosystem. So let's unpack these layers. The first layer, the foundational layer, with the customers up at the top. Life was simple about 10 years ago in the mobile ecosystem. If you were a customer, you would go to a Best Buy to choose where to buy a mobile handset. You would decide from whom to lease that service, the wireless operator, maybe AT&T or Verizon. And you'd choose a handset, probably oblivious to what exact OS was running on that handset. But where were all of you 10 years ago in this ecosystem? Who, by show of hands, was in the mobile ecosystem in 2004? Let's have a look. A good number of people in the audience. It sucked, didn't it? Because you were down here, far away from your customers. In fact, your customers were really the wireless carriers like AT&T or the handset manufacturers like Nokia. Think if you had a game, Snake or Brick Breaker, you would have to beg to get on deck. Or if you had a location service, you'd have to work with the carriers at whatever pace that might be to get yourself in front of your end customer. This stayed the same even through the launch of the first smartphone, the BlackBerry in 2004, and even the first generation iPhone, which most people consider the onset of the smartphone era. This foundational layer still was very much intact. Now, for those of you in the audience who are saying, and who bristle at the thought of working with companies in this foundational layer, thinking that they're slow-moving Heck, you might even point to a couple fossils in this layer. This is the layer where, still today, a lot of the revenue gets made. And $1 trillion of market cap exists inside of this layer. But something changed in 2008. There was an earthquake, and it started with the App Store. This was the second generation of the iPhone that launched and really created a change in the ecosystem, because what it did to all of you was it elevated the developer community, something we call the rise of the developer, closer to your end customer. Life is now starting to look a lot better, right? I like it. So the problem was, though, there are only two people standing up there. 2008, the total addressable market for you as an app developer was a paltry 5 million iPhones. Wasn't that many folks to reach out there. So what happened next? Well, you started to see the second layer develop, the horizontal layer. And these were companies like mobile marketing companies and advertising companies, analytics, payments, security and device management companies that could exist horizontally across all of mobile. Now, some of you might be with companies in this layer, and you're thinking, well, it's a pretty good place to be. And indeed, this was the first place where significant market cap was created inside of the app ecosystem. You have a couple of advantages being in this layer. Number one, you get to address the entire base of mobile handsets. There's no reason why an analytics provider should not be addressing every single handset that's out there. Two, you usually have a technology advantage. Often it's pretty deep, based in data, or just simply the fact that you have an SDK lodged in multiple different apps. And three, you're kind of diversified away from the fashions and whims of any one app gaining prominence or losing popularity week over week. But there are also some drawbacks being in this layer, and some of you might feel this every single day. It's difficult because you're not that close to your customer. You have to work through your vertical apps in order to reach that end customer, and so it's difficult to build a brand. Second of all, your customers are developers who, as they're starting out, don't usually have all that much money. And so you have to adjust your business model as a result. Finally, we get to the vertical app layer. And this is where all the excitement has been happening over the last couple months, because finally we have 1.5 billion handsets out there as an addressable market for these vertical apps to go and address. And so you have verticals like gaming, like productivity, like social, like entertainment, all the different things which you think about as far as use cases for your phones. And for those of you in this layer, you also have a couple of advantages. You're close to your consumer, and you get to benefit from all the hard work that the horizontal layer has been laying the groundwork for. So distribution through app stores is now much easier than it was before. Payments across international borders, much easier than it ever used to be. Analytics and the transparency that allows you to get feedback from your end customers. All of these are benefits from being in that vertical app layer. But you'll also know that there's some disadvantages here. It's a competitive space. How do you rise above the noise when you're one app out of a million? And second of all, you're subject to changing trends and a frictionless, really low switching cost for a consumer to come and download the next app when they come and see it. Anytime you have a hardware platform that emerges, one of the very first verticals to take notice is gaming. And mobile is no exception. But we also see, outside of gaming, a number of different categories starting to emerge on mobile. This is data from App Annie, which shows downloads as well as revenue across the app ecosystem, where verticals like entertainment, things like Pandora and Spotify, productivity, companies like Dropbox and Evernote, as well as social, starting to see phenomenal growth, both in terms of downloads and revenue. But there's one important thing we're missing out here. Most people put the app ecosystem and the market size at about $30 billion in 2014. That's pretty stunning. Add to that perhaps another $30 billion spent in mobile advertising, for which a number of companies use their business models around. So a company like Pandora would use advertising as their primary business model, another $30 billion. But both of these are dwarfed by what we like to call on-app commerce. And this is often unmeasured and forgotten about. Think about the Starbucks app that you use to purchase your coffee, or the purchase you made through a Square reader, or the Uber ride that you took here, perhaps the purchase you made on the Amazon app, or even the Dropbox subscription you signed up to with a credit card. All of this business opportunity is not captured either inside of apps or advertising, and it's huge. So there you have it, mobile tectonics and the mobile ecosystem. But what does it mean for you? Let's take a couple examples, because this ecosystem is what we use as the context and the backdrop for a lot of strategic conversations we have inside our companies. Dropbox is a wonderfully horizontal platform as the file system for any device. But they also have a vertical app, the hugely popular Dropbox app. Recently, we've started to see their strategy evolve as they've released multiple other vertical apps like Carousel in Photos or Mailbox in email. This allows them to expand their vertical footprint on top of the horizontal platform which they've built. Take Evernote, a vertically focused app for note-taking. Early days, they recognized that a number of companies were springing up, doing very bespoke note-taking applications. And what they did was, recognizing that they had built this infrastructure to support the Evernote vertical app, they decided to turn that horizontal technology into an open platform called the Evernote trunk. Doing this, they brought a number of companies onto their side and into the Evernote fold. So they took a vertical strategy and made it horizontal. In the social category, there's a company called Kakao, which has about 90% market share in Korea. They took their vertical dominance and built a horizontal platform for app distribution, and then extended it to gifting and commerce. WhatsApp, by contrast, have taken a different tact. They've decided to remain a vertical app. Why? Well, the founders, Jan and Brian, would consider, at this point, building a horizontal platform to be a distraction, because there's so much to do still in their vertical application. It's not that they haven't thought about it. But first of all, they're in a vertical where the social nature of their vertical allows for natural network and viral effects. And they have one of the most engaging apps that allows them to continue to grow as a vertical app. But second of all, their decision aligns well with their business model. They decided to charge consumers $1 per user per year. So the end user pays for the WhatsApp service, unlike many of the other messaging apps who rely on a horizontal for their business model with things like advertising. So those are some examples of how startups and young companies are thinking about strategically using this ecosystem to their advantage. But let's make sure we don't forget that the tectonic plates are not standing still. We have to look at some of the biggest companies and how they're moving in this ecosystem as well. So let's take Apple. Most people would recognize Apple's mobile strategy centers around their iPhone. And that's true. But their mobile strategy actually dates all the way back to 2001, when they launched iTunes and started collecting tens of millions, now hundreds of millions, of credit card details across the globe. This allowed them to start building out the horizontal layer, and they've continued up the stack to build up their vertical presence as well. iMessage, Apple Maps, FaceTime, Siri, sometimes at the direct competitive posture to other large platforms in the ecosystem, such as Google, who have Android as the centerpiece of their mobile strategy. Well, Android doesn't go all the way down to the hardware, but Google has continued to build out across all 3 layers, with vertical apps like Maps, which are mainstays for mobile, as well as Google Play, and through acquisitions like AdMob, Waze, and Motorola, they've continued to expand across all 3 layers. Perhaps the most interesting, though, of all of these is Facebook. As recently as 2 years ago, Facebook was criticized for having no mobile strategy. Most of us just recognize Facebook as a vertical app, probably the most popular vertical app that's out there. And we might also give Facebook credit for Facebook Messenger through the Beluga acquisition, as well as Instagram and now WhatsApp. But beneath the surface, Facebook has been building methodically its horizontal platform, starting with Facebook Connect, then going to mobile app installs, and at F8 recently announced the Facebook Audience Network, their ad network. They've even built out with Parse, a developer toolkit, and gone a little bit deeper with Facebook Home. Note that their business model entirely depends on this horizontal layer. It's now more than 50% of their business on top of mobile, 2 years after being criticized for having no mobile business. Now, after going through some of these large and successful players, just a word of caution, because there is one player where they failed to recognize the shifting mobile tectonic plates. Can anyone hazard a guess as to which player that was? Microsoft? Yes, that's the answer I was looking for. BlackBerry. BlackBerry had one of the most loved foundational layer products that was ever created, the BlackBerry handset and the BlackBerry OS. And they had a vertical app layer which was incredibly engaging in BBM. When the horizontal layers came to rise in 2008 and 2009, and iTunes and Google Play started to gain prominence, BlackBerry didn't recognize that opportunity. Imagine what would have happened if BlackBerry had open sourced or made a horizontal platform out of their BBM platform as a horizontal layer. As it was, BlackBerry launched their iOS and Android apps about 5 years too late. Some could argue that's what created the opportunity for companies like WhatsApp and the other messaging companies out there. So let me leave you with this picture, now that you understand the different layers in the tectonic plates, and 3 questions that I have for you to go away with. Number 1, where do you position yourself on this layer and the various characteristics which come with each layer? Number 2, how do you strategically position yourself to gain unfair advantage, either by partnering with other folks in the ecosystem or by operating on multiple layers, like we talked about with Dropbox and Evernote? And 3, how are the tectonic plates shifting around you, and how can you either watch out for things that might be coming along your way or take advantage of those shifting tectonic plates? Just as a quick disclaimer, I should note that many of the companies that we've talked about today, we have the pleasure of being in business with over at Sequoia. But let me leave you with one final thought. Because as complex and exciting as the mobile tectonics are, this is just the beginning. We're at the center of a number of burgeoning industries. The smartphone spawning off smart homes, smart TVs, smart cars, and smart watches. It's an exciting time to be in mobile. So as you think about building your company and gaining an advantage using the mobile tectonic plates, don't forget about the geology. Thank you.